From the station working for you, this is WRTV News at 5:30, streaming now.
And now at 5:30, all kinds of safety plans are in place ahead of Wednesday's inauguration. We're taking a look at what protesters can expect if they still want to be in D.C. for the big day. And interested in a job with INDOT? We're not just talking about seasonal positions. Details on a career fair happening this week. Chris?
Topping our lineup, flagpoles were used to beat police and smash windows during the Capitol riots. We're taking a look into why flagpoles were allowed in then, why they won't be allowed at the inauguration. And it has been around for nearly 100 years, but a tennis-like game is seeing its popularity surge during this pandemic, why so many people are taking it up. Also, a growing number of people are skipping the car lot and instead buying their new ride online during this pandemic. We'll talk about how you can make sure you are still getting a good deal.
First at 5:30, security in Washington continues to intensify ahead of Wednesday's inauguration. One question is where protesters who have rights under the First Amendment will be allowed to gather. Scripps reporter Joe St. George walks us through the zones that are established and why some still feel it is worth it to travel to Washington.
When protesters show up here in Washington for the inauguration, this is one of two First Amendment zones that have been established. This is John Marshall Park near the Canadian Embassy, where protesters will be allowed to gather. You can see the plastic shield keeps them in. We are located right off of Pennsylvania Avenue, and you can see the Capitol behind us, but you can also see that we're quite far from the actual inaugural stage. One question you may have is why are people bothering to come here at all? Unlike January 6th, President Trump is not calling for a rally, and President-elect Joe Biden has told his supporters not to come at all because of the pandemic. We found Gino Ross in town from California and asked her that question. Everybody said don't come to D.C., stay away, but you guys still came.
Well, we planned this trip. You know, we didn't know it was going to go down like this, you know. We're here for history. We're not here because of the protest. We're not here. We want to see the Capitol. Still, the security around the Capitol enough to make even inauguration regulars intimidated. Inside the Capitol this past weekend, it looked like a military camp. National Guardsmen on cots, some playing cards, just to pass the time. In Washington, I'm Joe St. George.
Starting tonight, expect to see some changes as the North Split reconstruction project continues. INDOT says the southbound I-65 ramp to Michigan Street is expected to close at 7 p.m. It is not scheduled to reopen until late spring or early summer. The exit to Ohio Street will remain open through the Michigan Street ramp closure. And speaking of INDOT, the agency will be holding a virtual career fair on Wednesday. It's from 4 to 5 p.m. on January 20th. Anyone interested in learning more about current employment opportunities and benefits at INDOT is invited to attend. Registration is not required. Featured jobs include highway maintenance technician, equipment mechanics, construction engineers, project inspectors, and seasonal positions. You can find details on how to join this event in this story at hiringhoosiers.com. Kevin.
And Amanda, you mentioned the South Split. We've got some splits in the cloud cover. This is looking northwest over Methodist Hospital's complex, and you can see a few breaks there as we wait for a southern system to impact really the southern third of the state, maybe southern half. But notice, down in Evansville, it's 44, 37 in Bloomington. The warm temperatures with the onset will lead to a rain-snow mix, then changing to snow. That factor will play a role in snowfall potential, which I think is generally around an inch. Some isolated spots could see a little more than that, say from Bloomington, Nashville, Columbus, and Greensburg south. With temperatures in the 20s as we go overnight and into the morning hours tomorrow, certainly slick spots potentially along I-69, I-65 south, I-74 headed toward Cincinnati. We've got flurries departing in northeast Indiana. We wait then on the system that sits to our west. The air right now is still fairly dry in Indiana, so it will take a while for things to moisten up. By 11 o'clock, that's what we expect. Some snow and rain mixed. Bloomington, Nashville, Columbus down toward Seymour. We'll finish the timeline and move into your Tuesday coming up. Chris?
The U.S. Capitol complex was temporarily locked down today. Happened during a rehearsal for President-elect Biden's inauguration. Smoke from a homeless encampment nearby caused some alarm and part of the building was evacuated. The Capitol complex returned to normal operations before noon. The Secret Service says there was no threat to the public or Capitol. Now, security checks around Washington, D.C. ahead of the inauguration are unprecedented. The FBI is now doing background checks on all the National Guard troops coming into D.C. for added protection. That's on top of the screening the military already does. U.S. officials say they are looking for any sort of insider threat. There are about 2.5 times the normal amount of National Guard troops coming in for Wednesday's event compared to past inaugurations. There's concern about how some people may be spending their stimulus money.
When you give them any kind of money, but when you give them $600, they're going to really take it to the limit. And you know what I'm saying? They really raise your chances of losing your life.
A Nashville area HIV advocacy center that also runs a needle exchange program reported an increase in overdoses after the first round of stimulus payments. They started handing out Narcan alongside clean syringes ahead of the latest payments. Now, extra money can feed any vice. People admitted that in a Wallet Hub survey earlier this year that determined almost 24 million Americans will buy drugs, alcohol, or tobacco with their stimulus money. Now, there is no large-scale scientific research that we could find on if an influx of cash can directly cause more overdoses, but there is plenty of data that shows overdoses and drug-related deaths do increase as unemployment rises. Those familiar with addiction know that firsthand.
And I'm in recovery myself, so that's why I do the work that I do. That's why I'm on this ground running, you know, because I know what addiction will do to people.
Now, there were more than 81,000 overdose deaths in the 12 months between May of 2019 and May 2020. The CDC says that is the highest number of overdose deaths ever recorded in a 12-month period. More than $4 billion was designated for mental and substance abuse disorders in the latest COVID relief bill. Now, next in our lineup, flagpoles were used to beat police and smash windows during the Capitol riots. We're looking at why flagpoles were allowed then, but they will not be allowed at the inauguration.
Only at Ashley Home Store.
An Indiana National Guard member deployed to Bloomington to help with the pandemic was killed in a hit-and-run crash. The Monroe County coroner identified the victim as 18-year-old Matthew Recker from Poland in Clay County. The crash happened late Saturday night in Bloomington at the intersection of West 17th Street and North Kinzer Pike. Officers found one person trapped in a vehicle. Police say the other driver left his vehicle behind and fled the scene. Officers say the following day they arrested the driver, a man from DeKalb, Illinois, the Wheeler Mission Center for Men in Bloomington. He's accused of leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death.
During the Capitol riots, flagpoles were used to beat police and smash windows. Our investigative team found during most large-scale gatherings, they wouldn't have been allowed. But Patrick Terpstra shows us rules against flagpoles didn't apply to this crowd, but they will be during the presidential inauguration this week.
There were no rules to stop insurgents from bringing flagpoles to the U.S. Capitol. They became weapons against police. The FBI arrested Peter Sager, the man they say is seen here beating an officer. They were also used as tools to get inside and supports for the Confederate flag, displayed in this temple of American democracy. This man, identified as Kevin Seafried, also now facing charges. We learned the mob was able to carry flagpoles because the march was not part of a secured, permitted event where authorities can restrict people from bringing most anything they deem dangerous. The Park Service bans flagpoles for the masses viewing fireworks on the 4th of July. The Secret Service forbids them at inaugurations, including this one, and also prohibited them at the rally near the White House before the march to the Capitol. Video shows no flagpoles. But across the street, outside Secret Service jurisdiction, an overflow of people gathered, as was their right under the First Amendment, no permit needed. They had flagpoles in hand.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol
as they made their way to Congress.
People sometimes will use a flagpole as a weapon, and so that's why a number of municipalities over the years have put in place ordinances to ban carrying these things.
Flagpoles are allowed in D.C. outside of organized events. The Park Service tells us anyone's free to carry a flag on the National Mall.
I think we need to take those First Amendment rights very seriously, but we need to balance those against the idea that a flagpole can be used as a weapon that can injure or kill somebody.
The crowd and their flagpoles protected by the government they attacked. In Washington, D.C., I'm Patrick Terpstra reporting.
All right, Patrick, thank you. More to get to on our lineup. It's been around for nearly 100 years, but a tennis-like game is seeing its popularity surge during the pandemic. Why so many people are taking it up?
And follow us on social media.
We all know about the physical toll that COVID-19 is taking on our medical professionals. But there's new research showing what it's doing psychologically as well. And as Maya Rodriguez tells us, an expert in PTSD says the mental health toll that they are seeing in healthcare workers is similar to what they've seen in war zones.
Nearly 1 year after the first official COVID-19 diagnosis in the U.S., medical professionals remain on the front lines of a seemingly never-ending pandemic.
It's been a trying time for all of us, for all my colleagues and everyone involved in the care of the patient.
A trying time with real consequences on the mental health of those who we rely on for our health. According to a recent study conducted by Mental Health America, 93% of healthcare workers reported experiencing stress. 86% reported anxiety. 76% were exhausted and burned out. And 75% said they were overwhelmed.
If you work in an environment like that, you don't know what's going to come. It's stressful because you're afraid of not doing your job right. You don't want people dying, clearly. You also are afraid you're going to get this communicable disease.
Dr. Eugene Lipoff is with the Stella Center, which specializes in treating post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. He says some people working in healthcare are exhibiting symptoms of PTSD because of the constant psychological toll COVID-19 is taking on them.
It's very similar to being in a war zone, and that actually leads to fight and flight system being kicked on. And if it stays on, then you get symptoms of PTSD.
How to combat it? Dr. Lipoff suggests several steps.
Number one, you need to get some sleep, meaning turn off the devices, but if you can, get outside, walk, get some natural light, walk for at least 30 minutes.
And finally, he says, healthcare workers need to remember to take care of themselves with the same passion they often show for their patients. In Washington, I'm Maya Rodriguez.
Maya, thank you. Now, learning from home has been tough, especially for families without internet access. Kids First Chicago is an organization that has spent the past 7 months helping kids get connected. In Chicago, it's been able to provide free internet to public school students. That's about 35,000 households.
You know, with Chicago taking the lead with providing internet to its families in underserved communities, other cities are, adopting the same, program that we have here. So I think that speaks value to here in the city.
This model is meant to be sustained for a long time, which makes it more appealing for places that need community broadband. The National Museum of African American Music opened today in Nashville. The museum is dedicated to the contributions that African Americans have made in the music industry. That includes slave songs to hip hop and rock and roll. The museum will officially be open to the public on January 30th.
This Hamilton County bird bath became a dinner table, maybe a lunch table today for the squirrel. You can see a little cold corn is what was being served, and he still has some work to do there. I'm sure he had some competition at some point once they saw what was going on, and he had all the corn to himself. We have clouds across most of central Indiana with some breaks in there. These are high clouds, which give you an indication of the lowest levels of the atmosphere still fairly dry. That's significant because we'll need to moisten things up before we start to generate some snow in the south. Temperature in Tipton, 31. It's 30 in Peru. On the warm side, Sullivan over to Bedford at 39 degrees. You probably noticed some flurries through the day, almost a vision test at times, very, very light, but through the Great Lakes, lower Michigan, and over to Buffalo, through Cleveland, where you would expect to see some of these lake effect snow showers. That's going on. This is what we'll inherit that crosses through St. Louis toward Effingham, Illinois, and then coming in probably around Terre Haute or south bringing with it at first, the onset would be rain and snow, then changing to some snow overnight. We pick up the timeline for you at 9 o'clock. To 11 o'clock we go, and you see the mixed colors of pink, blue, and green. That's rain and snow. Then as we go over into the early morning hours, 3 a.m., still staying in the south of a Bloomington to Greensburg line, some minor accumulations. But if you have to drive on I-65 and get toward the Ohio River or I-74 towards Cincinnati, could see some slick spots in the morning with an inch or so of accumulation. Temperature at noon, 30. Afternoon temperatures tomorrow, modest, about 34. But do you notice this? A mixture of clouds and sunshine. You may need your sunglasses once again, and there's more of that in the forecast, which you'll see here in just a couple minutes. Chris?
Being stuck inside during the winter months of the pandemic has many going stir crazy. But a winter sport that allows for socializing from a distance while getting some fresh air is gaining popularity. And Usher Qureshi takes a look at the pandemic-proof sport that's just fun to play and watch.
It's been around for nearly 100 years, but during the pandemic, this sport, a cross between tennis, racquetball, and table tennis, has seen a surge in popularity.
We've seen probably 30 to 40% increase in our play levels.
Paddle tennis is a winter sport, played between October and March. The court is a third of the size of a normal tennis court and is surrounded by a 12-foot-high chicken wire fence.
The ball can go by you, hit the screen, come back, and you can hit it.
The courts are also heated to melt snow and keep them dry.
We'll play all the way down to like 0 degrees, and in some cases, guys will play even below 0.
Being outside all winter makes the winters go really quickly.
Its popularity has exploded over the last decade, and even more so during the pandemic, as people struggle for ways to stay active and social.
It's gotten extraordinarily busy as the more cases there are and the more people are shut out of other activities, they're turning to, in this case, paddle.
First 10. Eric Pitcher, who never played tennis, picked up a paddle 10 years ago.
There's a bunch of guys I play with on Sunday morning at 7:30. I mean, they're a little nutty, but we have an awful lot of fun.
All right, 35. But platform tennis does have a very high rate of injury. Have you had any injuries?
Not too many. I've been hit in the eye with a ball.
I've torn an MCL.
I've had a bicep tendon tear.
Shoulder. It's partially torn.
The cold temperatures affect blood flow to the tendons and muscles, so warming up is important for the mostly over 40 players.
We do know that approximately 66% of platform players suffer some form of injury. And out of those 66%, approximately 60% are repetitive injuries.
But in a time when social distancing is needed,
all I'm doing is working out of my house. I'm on stupid Zoom calls all the time.
If played with care, it may be just the right medicine.
It's literally has saved me from going crazy.
In Hinsdale, Illinois.
Woo! Nice one!
I'm Usher Qureshi.
Usher, thank you. And like many events, many upcoming new movie releases are again facing more delays in 2021 due to rising cases of COVID-19. They may not necessarily be all negative. Considering this weekend, the new movie to hit theaters, The Marksman, only made a little over $3 million. Only about 1/3 of U.S. theaters are open, and many are operating at reduced capacity. Some new films plan to be released on streaming services. Now, he's not even in the White House yet, but President-elect Biden's shelter dog, Major, is already doing good for other homeless animals. Yesterday, the Delaware Humane Association, where Major was adopted, held a virtual celebration. It was a fundraiser as well. Employees at the no-kill shelter told us that they raised more than $200,000 to help animals who still need homes.
Shelter animals are grateful, and they are more deserving than any other animal out there who's looking for a home right now.
The shelter reminds everyone, if you're not sure if an animal is right for your family, fostering is a great way to start. Many shelters are looking for more fosters because of the pandemic. Finally, in our lineup today, the pandemic is making more people open to buying a new car online. The research you need to do ahead of time to make sure you can still get a good deal.
No payments, no interest for 12 months.
The pandemic has changed the car buying process, and more people are now willing to make the purchase online. 45% of car shoppers say that they would do that now with a new car, according to J.D. Power. J.D. Power says the tools have gotten better over the past 9 months to buy a car online, and it's more common now to be able to do things like sign a contract remotely. But there are things you may want to consider doing in person before you buy online.
I think there's still kind of, touching feelings sitting inside the vehicle, test driving it, understanding that maybe in advance, maybe going in and driving the vehicle, being sure that, it has not only the features, but room that, that they're looking for.
He says when it comes to prices online, you need to see if it's a price range or the exact price you're going to pay. That exact price is going to depend on where you live and what incentives you're eligible for in your specific zip code. You also need to do your homework ahead of time looking at inventory.
They should go online, look at the dealer's inventory and see, look, do they have 2 of these online? In which case, you may not have a lot of flexibility around pricing there if the dealer only has a couple of them, or if they have, let's say 40 or 50, maybe you have a little bit more flexibility.
If you're financing or leasing, he says you need to have a good understanding of your credit ahead of time so you know if you're getting a fair deal there. You also need to prepare ahead of time if you're trading in your old car. There are tools online that can show you the value of your trade-in. You can't have the same conversation about it if you're buying online. Now, people are not supposed to be charged for COVID tests. Congress banned charging people, so why do bills like this show up in people's mailboxes? Tomorrow, what one woman learned as she refused to pay and fought to get her balance down to 0.
I'm hiding something from you just for a second or two here. 34 degrees next 2 days, and then there's the big reveal. We'll be up to 42 on Thursday, briefly warmer. We'll talk more about that in a bit.